The Alpha King pretended to be a crippled stranger. Only a rejected Omega gave him her last meal. Beneath the gray sky, the kingdom of Eldoria lay silent, its towers shadowed by winter's cold hand. The villagers whispered of the Alpha King, Kalen, whose name alone could send shivers through even the bravest hearts. They spoke of his strength, his cunning, and the cruel justice he often delivered. Few had seen him and lived to tell the tale. But now, Kalen was no longer the untouchable Alpha King. The attempt on his life had left him broken, bleeding, and forced to abandon his crown, if only temporarily. Every bone ached, and every breath felt like fire through his lungs. He crawled along the frozen forest floor, dragging one leg that refused to obey him. His royal cloak was torn, his armor dented and scorched from the battle. In his mind, he knew that to survive, he had to hide, not just from his enemies, but even from those who would recognize him and mistake weakness for opportunity. So Kalen became a stranger. A crippled man, shrouded in tattered cloth, leaning heavily on a broken branch as a makeshift staff. No crown adorned his head, no guards accompanied him, and no one would know that the man struggling through the snow was once the most feared ruler in the lands. The forest was quiet, except for the occasional snap of a frozen branch. The snow crunched under his careful steps. He had survived battles that would have destroyed entire armies, but now he faced a new enemy: solitude and hunger. His vision blurred as he stumbled over roots and stones, the world spinning around him. He barely noticed the small village ahead, tucked into the valley like a jewel hidden by the trees. Amara sat on the edge of her small hut, her hands wrapped around a wooden bowl. The villagers had long rejected her, whispering that she was weak, unworthy, and unlucky. She had tried to belong, tried to join her pack, but their cruelty had forced her out. Now she lived on the edge of survival, her meals meager, her body often shivering from cold. But there was pride in her, a stubborn flame that refused to die even in the harshest winters. That day she had prepared her last meal, a few scraps of bread and roasted roots, barely enough for herself. Yet as she gazed at the forest edge, she noticed a figure struggling through the snow. A man, hunched and limping, his movements uneven and desperate. His cloak was shredded, his body covered in blood and frostbite. Something in him stirred her instincts, a mix of curiosity, caution, and compassion. She hesitated. The villagers had taught her to fear strangers, to avoid trouble, to protect herself above all else. But she also knew hunger, pain, and rejection. She recognized a soul on the edge, someone who, like her, carried burdens the world could not forgive. Amara set down her bowl and stepped into the snow, her boots sinking into the drifts. "Wait," she called softly, her voice trembling but firm. "You look hurt. Come here." The man Kalen stopped, his sharp eyes barely focusing on her. He had expected villagers to ignore him, to lock their doors and whisper prayers against him. But this woman, she approached him, unafraid. He felt a strange warmth in that moment, a sensation he had not known since childhood. I cannot walk much farther," he whispered, his voice low and hoarse. Every word cost him effort, every sound seemed to echo painfully in his chest. Amara nodded. She gestured toward her hut. "Come, you can rest there. I have food if you are willing to accept it." Kalen hesitated. Pride screamed within him, the pride of a king who had always commanded obedience and respect. But the ache in his body, the cold in his veins, and the raw hunger clawing at him left no room for dignity. Slowly, he nodded, leaning on his branch staff as she helped him toward her small dwelling. Inside, the hut was modest, warmth from a small fire, a few simple furnishings, and the faint scent of herbs. Amara gestured to a stool near the hearth. "Sit," she said. "You look like you haven't eaten in days." Kalen lowered himself onto the stool, wincing as pain shot through his leg. He studied her, this woman who had offered him kindness without question. There was no fear in her eyes, no demand for allegiance, no attempt to use him. Only compassion. It was a foreign feeling, one he had long buried beneath authority and command. She placed the bowl in front of him. "It's not much," she said softly, "but it's warm. Eat." Kalen's hand hovered over the food. For a moment he considered refusing, maintaining the image of strength even in weakness. But hunger, raw and unrelenting, overcame his pride. He took the bowl, and as he ate, he watched her. "You seem strong," he said, his voice raspy. "Stronger than most." Amara frowned. "I survive," she replied. "That's all strength sometimes means." He nodded, appreciating her honesty. In her he saw a reflection of his own resilience, the stubbornness that had kept him alive in battle, in court intrigue, and now in the freezing forest. Hours passed. Kalen leaned against the fire, warmth seeping into his frozen limbs. Amara watched him from across the room, curiosity mingled with caution. She had never encountered anyone like this man, fragile yet commanding, broken yet unyielding. Something in him seemed familiar, though she could not place it. Then a distant howl pierced the night. Kalen's eyes sharpened. "Wolves," he muttered, his voice tight with recognition. Not ordinary wolves, but shadow wolves, creatures that had stalked the edges of Eldoria for generations. They were said to be drawn to power, to sense strength in a way humans could not, and they had already found him. Amara stiffened. "They won't come near the village, will they?" Kalen shook his head slowly. "They are not ordinary wolves," he said. "They sense something in me. Be ready." Her heart raced. She had faced danger before, but never like this. Still, she refused to cower. "Then we face them together," she said, setting her jaw. Night deepened. Outside, the howls grew closer, a chorus of menace and hunger. Kalen rose, using his branch as a support, moving toward the door. "Stay behind me," he warned. "If they see me first, we may have a chance." Amara's hands trembled, but she nodded. She followed him outside into the icy night. The snow swirled around them, cold as steel, and the shadow wolves emerged from the tree line. Their eyes glowed like embers, their forms shifting in the darkness. Kalen squared his shoulders, his voice calm but commanding. "Move carefully. Trust me." Amara obeyed, her fear tempered by trust she could not yet name. Together, they navigated the forest edge, evading the creatures with a mix of caution and daring. Every step was a test of courage, every movement a measure of instinct and will. Finally, as the wolves retreated, unnerved by Kalen's presence, Amara turned to him, her breath visible in the cold air. You are no ordinary man," she whispered. He gave a small, wry smile, pain still evident in his eyes. "Neither are you," he replied. "Few would risk themselves for a stranger. Fewer still would do it for someone like me." Amara felt a flutter of something she had not experienced in years, trust, awe, and an unspoken connection. She did not know who he truly was, and perhaps it was safer that way. For now, he was the stranger she had saved, and he was alive because of her. Kalen looked down at the snow, at the blood and frost that marked his journey. He had survived the betrayal, the battle, and the assassination attempt, but something else had survived too: hope. Hope that perhaps not all humans were lost to cruelty, that even in rejection and pain, someone could act with kindness. And as he glanced at Amara, offering her a tentative smile, he felt it stir, a feeling long buried beneath duty and power: gratitude. And perhaps something more, something fragile, dangerous, and beautiful. The wind carried the distant howl once more, and Kalen tightened his grip on his staff. The night was far from over, and the dangers they would face were only beginning. But for now, amidst the cold and shadows, a bond had been forged between a fallen king and a rejected Omega, a bond that neither time nor power could easily sever. The fire crackled, the snow fell silently, and the forest waited. Somewhere in the shadows, eyes glimmered, and the night held its breath. The stranger and the Omega had found each other, but the story was only beginning. The forest lay cloaked in mist, the snow thick beneath their feet. Kalen's leg throbbed with every step, but he refused to let the pain control him. Each movement was measured, deliberate. Beside him, Amara moved with agility, her senses sharp, scanning the shadows for danger. She had grown up on the edges of this forest, but even she felt the weight of something unnatural in the air tonight. "You need to rest," she said, glancing at him with concern. "You're pushing too hard." "I cannot stop," Kalen replied, his voice low. "If I fall behind, they will find me. And if they find me, everything I've fought for will be lost." Amara's brow furrowed. She did not understand everything he said, yet she sensed the truth beneath his words, the authority that clung to him even in weakness. "Then we move faster, but you must listen to me too. One misstep and we'll both fall." Kalen studied her, this small, fierce woman who spoke without fear. Her courage was remarkable, far beyond what most of his soldiers had shown in battle. He had always commanded loyalty, but she offered it freely, without expectation. There was a purity to it, a fire that refused to be snuffed out by fear or rejection. They moved through the trees, the snow crunching beneath their boots. Every branch seemed to reach for them like the hands of the forest itself. Shadow wolves lingered at the edges of their vision, silent and patient, watching, waiting. Kalen's senses, honed over years of ruling and warfare, picked up the faintest shifts in their movement. "They are still following us," he murmured, his eyes narrowing. "They know I am here." Amara swallowed hard, gripping her staff tighter. "Then we need to find shelter somewhere hidden. You cannot fight them like this. Your strength is limited." He nodded reluctantly. Pride battled with necessity. "Lead the way," he said, allowing himself to rely on her guidance. She led him to a small glade, hidden by thick evergreens and the shadow of a fallen cliff. The snow was deeper here, but it offered cover. "We can stay here for a while," she said, her voice softer now, almost gentle. "I know how to keep warm, how to survive even in this cold." Kalen lowered himself to the ground, careful not to show weakness. He had always been a king who inspired fear, who demanded respect, yet here he was, leaning on the mercy of someone he had only just met. And yet, he felt no shame, only a strange sense of peace. Amara set about making a small fire, gathering dry twigs and kindling from beneath the snow. The flames flickered to life, casting warm light across their faces. She watched him quietly, noting the way he studied the forest, alert and cautious. "You're different," she said finally, "not like the others. Even when you're hurt, you carry yourself with authority." Kalen allowed himself a faint smile. "A king carries authority whether he wishes it or not. It is a part of who I am, even if no one knows my face." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Your face? You mean you're not just a stranger?" He shook his head slightly. "I am not who I seem." His words were cryptic, yet she sensed no threat. There was honesty beneath the mystery, and she trusted it, though she did not know why. The night stretched on, filled with quiet conversation and moments of tension. The shadow wolves remained at the edges, their glowing eyes reflecting the firelight, their breaths misting in the cold air. Amara kept a watchful gaze, ready to defend both herself and this enigmatic man who had stumbled into her life. "You've been alone long," Kalen said softly after a while. "Why do you help me?" Amara hesitated, her eyes fixed on the fire. Because someone should. Because no one helped me when I was rejected. And because I know what it is to be alone and forgotten. I could not leave you out there to die." He regarded her silently, his heart stirring with something he had not felt in years. Admiration, yes, but also an unfamiliar warmth. In her simple act of kindness, he saw courage and compassion intertwined, a combination more rare than any sword he had wielded or any victory he had claimed. The fire crackled, and the night deepened. They shared stories cautiously, both aware of the danger surrounding them. Amara spoke of her pack, of the rejection that had forced her into solitude, and the constant struggle to survive. Kalen spoke of battles and betrayals, though he carefully omitted his royal identity. In these exchanges, a connection began to form, a fragile bridge built from shared pain and unspoken understanding. As the hours passed, Kaelin observed Amara more closely. She was not merely surviving, she was growing stronger, sharper, more capable. Her eyes, alert and unafraid, reflected a determination that reminded him of his younger self. And yet, beneath that strength, there was vulnerability, a yearning for acceptance and trust that resonated with him deeply. Suddenly, a low growl cut through the night. Kaelin's eyes narrowed. Shadow wolves emerged from the tree line, silent and deliberate, circling them as if testing the strength of their prey. "They are more than ordinary wolves," Kaelin said, his voice tense. "They sense power, something in me. Be ready, Amara." Her heart pounded, but she stood firm. "I will not let them harm you," she said, gripping her staff. We faced them together. The wolves moved closer, their eyes glowing like embers. Kaelin's hand brushed over the small dagger he carried, though he knew the fight would not be simple. "Follow my lead," he said. "Do not panic." Amara nodded, her body tense but steady. She had faced danger before, but never like this. Every movement was a test of courage, every breath a reminder that life could be fleeting. The first wolf lunged, and Kaelin met it with precise, controlled strikes. Amara assisted as best she could, using her staff to fend off the creatures. Despite her fear, she moved with a fierce determination that impressed Kaelin. She was not a helpless Omega. She was a warrior in her own right, guided by instinct and will. The battle raged through the glade, the fire casting dancing shadows over the snow. Kaelin fought with measured strength, his every motion calculated, while Amara's courage shone brightly beside him. Together, they pushed back the wolves, forcing them to retreat into the darkness. When the last of the shadow wolves disappeared, silence returned to the forest. Kaelin leaned heavily on his staff, his chest heaving. Amara approached him cautiously, checking for injuries. "You're stronger than I imagined," she said softly. He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And you are braver than I expected." Few would stand their ground against creatures like those. Amara's cheeks flushed, partly from exertion and partly from the acknowledgement. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as rejected, not as weak, but as someone capable and worthy. Kaelin's gaze lingered on her, unspoken thoughts stirring within him. There was a bond forming here, delicate and dangerous, one built on trust, courage, and an unspoken recognition of each other's strength. The night deepened further, and Kaelin felt the weight of his secret pressing upon him. He could not reveal his true identity yet, not while danger still lurked, not while his enemies searched for him. But the more he observed Amara, the more he realized that her loyalty was genuine, and perhaps she could be the one who would stand by him, even if she knew who he truly was. Amara stirred the fire, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. She felt a strange sense of safety beside this stranger, despite the chaos surrounding them. There was something in him, something familiar yet unknowable, that made her trust him in a way she had not trusted anyone before. As the first hints of dawn painted the sky in pale gold, Kaelin spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "We must move soon. The wolves are not gone, and the forest will not remain silent for long. There is more danger ahead." Amara nodded, determination in her eyes. "Then we face it together. I will not leave you, stranger." Kaelin allowed himself a small, rare smile. For the first time since his fall, he felt hope, not just for survival, but for something deeper. A connection had formed between him and this rejected Omega, a bond that might endure even the darkest trials to come. And as they prepared to leave the safety of the glade, the wind carrying the distant howl of more shadow wolves, Kaelin realized that the journey ahead would test them both, not only in strength and skill, but in trust, courage, and perhaps even the dangerous stirrings of the heart. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the mist curling around them like fingers. The Alpha King, hidden in the guise of a crippled stranger, and the rejected Omega, bold and unyielding, had found each other. And the story of their shared courage and fragile bond was only beginning. The forest began to thin, the snow-covered trees giving way to open fields that stretched toward the ruined outskirts of Eldoria. Kalen moved carefully, leaning on his staff, every step deliberate. The pain in his leg reminded him that he was no longer the unstoppable Alpha King. He had to rely on Amara now, not only for guidance but for her courage and sharp instincts. Amara walked beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. "The village elders said this way is safe," she said, though uncertainty lingered in her voice. She had led him through hidden paths, across icy streams and into dense thickets, and she knew the dangers were far from over. Kalen's gaze swept the landscape. The ruins ahead were silent, yet he sensed the tension in the air, the kind that precedes ambush or betrayal. He could feel the enemy closing in, even if he could not see them. And yet, as he looked at Amara, her strength and determination gave him hope. "You've done well, Amara," he said quietly. "You've kept me alive when no one else would. Few would risk themselves like you have." She shrugged, hiding the warmth that his words stirred in her. "I've survived worse," she replied, "and I'm not done yet." Kalen studied her, noting how her eyes glimmered with fierce resolve. She was no ordinary Omega. Her courage was rare, her mind sharp, and her heart unyielding. And yet, he felt the weight of his secret pressing against him. Soon, he would have to reveal his identity. She needed to know who he truly was, but the timing had to be right. As they neared the ruins, the wind carried faint sounds of movement, footsteps, whispers, and the clatter of distant weapons. Kalen's eyes narrowed. "We are not alone," he said. "Prepare yourself." Amara's grip on her staff tightened. "I am ready." From the shadows, figures emerged. Soldiers, well-trained, organized, and deadly. They did not recognize Kalen, seeing only a crippled stranger who had wandered too close to their camp. The soldiers hesitated, unsure if he was a threat. Kalen moved swiftly, despite the pain, directing Amara with precision. "Stay behind me, watch their flanks. Use the trees, they cannot predict our movements." Amara nodded, her heart racing. Together, they fought with a blend of instinct and strategy. Kalen's strikes were precise, each movement a lesson in efficiency and control, while Amara's agility and quick thinking allowed her to fend off attackers and create openings. They were a perfect team, one guided by experience, the other by intuition. When the last soldier fell, Kalen's breathing was heavy, his leg trembling from exertion. Amara approached, concern written across her face. "You should rest," she said softly. "I cannot," he replied. "There is more to do. We must reach the hidden keep before nightfall." Amara frowned. "Why are we heading there? What's waiting for us?" Kalen hesitated, the secret gnawing at him. He had planned to reveal his identity once they were safe, but the risk of delay was growing. Finally he spoke, his voice steady but low. "The truth is, I am not just a stranger. I am the Alpha King of Eldoria." Amara froze, her eyes wide. "What?" Kalen nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "Kalen, I was attacked, betrayed by those closest to me. I hid my identity to survive, to uncover who seeks to destroy the kingdom." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Amara felt a surge of anger, betrayal, and confusion. You let me help you, knowing you were the king?" she asked, her voice trembling. "All this time, I thought I was helping a stranger." Kalen's eyes softened. "I did not want to deceive you, but my enemies cannot know I am alive. Your courage and loyalty are rare, so rare that I needed to see if it was genuine, if it came from your heart." Amara turned away, her hands shaking. "You used me." "I did not," he said gently. "You acted freely. You chose kindness when no one else would. That choice defines you, Amara. Not my secret, not my crown. You are more than your rejection. You are strength itself." Her breath hitched, and for a moment she did not respond. The wind rustled through the ruins, carrying the faint scent of frost and iron. She wanted to believe him, yet the sting of betrayal lingered. Kalen stepped closer, careful not to invade her space, but unable to hide the earnestness in his eyes. "I am still the same man you saved, though I wear a crown you do not yet see. I ask for your trust, not as a king, but as someone who has come to depend on you." Amara's hands clenched at her sides. She did not know if she could forgive him so easily. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw the truth, the honesty behind his words, the weight of responsibility, and the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. Before she could reply, a sudden movement in the shadows drew their attention. Another group approached, larger and more organized than the last. Kalen's jaw tightened. "Enemies," he muttered. "They know I am alive. We must act quickly." Amara nodded, steeling herself. "Then we fight together. No hesitation." The battle was fierce. Kalen and Amara moved as one, covering each other's weaknesses, exploiting the enemy's missteps. Despite his injury, Kalen fought with precision and power, his movements commanding even the shadows to obey. Amara's courage shone brightly, her every action a testament to her strength and determination. During a lull in the fight, Kalen's opponent lunged at him, a dagger aimed for his chest. Amara reacted instantly, striking the attacker with her staff, sending him sprawling. Kalen glanced at her, admiration and gratitude mingling in his gaze. "You are remarkable," he said, his voice strained but sincere. "You're not too bad yourself," she replied, though a flicker of uncertainty lingered in her tone. The battle ended, leaving the ruins silent once more. Kalen leaned heavily on his staff, sweat and snow mingling on his face. Amara approached, carefully checking him for injuries. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she said gently. "I cannot falter," he replied. "Not while the kingdom is in danger, and not while I have found someone I can trust, someone like you." Amara's heart stirred at his words, though she kept her expression guarded. She had seen kings before, but none had ever spoken to her with such honesty, such vulnerability. She wanted to believe him, to trust him fully, but the memory of betrayal lingered. As they prepared to move toward the hidden keep, Kalen spoke quietly. "There is something you must know. The enemies who attacked us, they are not ordinary soldiers. They seek to control the kingdom, to bend it to their will, and they will not stop until I am dead or they have captured you." Amara's eyes widened. "Me?" "Yes," Kalen said firmly. "You have proven yourself to be brave, resourceful, and loyal. They will see that as a threat. I cannot protect the kingdom without you by my side, Amara, and I will not ask you to face this danger alone." She nodded slowly, her fear tempered by determination. "Then I will stand with you, no matter what comes." Kalen's heart swelled with something he had long thought lost: hope. Here was a woman who chose to fight beside him, not for power, not for reward, but because she believed in what was right. And in that choice, he saw the possibility of redemption, not just for the kingdom, but for himself. They moved through the ruins, careful and deliberate, until they reached a secluded chamber within the hidden keep. It was a small, stone room, protected from wind and snow. Kalen allowed himself to sit, leaning against the wall as Amara tended to the fire. For the first time, they spoke not of danger or strategy, but of themselves. Amara shared stories of her childhood, of rejection, and the harsh lessons she had learned to survive. Kalen spoke of battles, betrayals, and the weight of leadership. In each story, they found understanding, empathy, and a growing connection. The night deepened, and silence fell over the hidden keep. Kalen watched Amara as she stirred the fire, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. She was strong, brave, and kind, everything he had longed for in someone who could stand beside him. And in that quiet moment, he realized that his journey had brought him to more than survival. It had brought him to trust, to connection, and perhaps, if fate allowed, to love. But danger was never far behind. The shadows still whispered outside, the enemies still plotted, and the truth of the kingdom's betrayal remained unresolved. Kalen and Amara had found each other, yet their trials were only beginning. And as the fire flickered, casting shadows across their faces, Kalen knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The first light of dawn broke over Eldoria. casting pale gold across the ruins of the hidden keep. Snow sparkled in the early morning light, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Kalen rose, leaning on his staff, his gaze firm. Today, the kingdom that had been lost to betrayal and shadow would be reclaimed. Amara stirred the fire, her eyes alert despite the exhaustion of the previous battles. She had fought alongside him, bled alongside him, and now she understood the man beneath the armor and the crown, the Alpha King who had hidden in weakness, the man who trusted her when no one else would. "You're ready," she said quietly, her voice carrying both resolve and care. "We face them together, yes," Kalen nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Together, nothing will stop us now." They stepped into the snow, their presence commanding and determined. The villagers and loyal soldiers who had hidden during the turmoil began to emerge, drawn by the news of Kalen's survival and the promise of his return. Whispers followed them. The crippled stranger was gone, replaced by the Alpha King, alive and unbroken. Their first challenge came swiftly. A rival noble, the one responsible for the initial assassination attempt, had gathered forces, seeking to seize the throne in Kalen's absence. Soldiers armed with swords and banners advanced, confident in their advantage. Kalen's eyes narrowed. "Amara, stay close. Watch my side, but trust yourself too. Your courage matters here as much as mine." Amara nodded, gripping her staff with renewed determination. She had grown stronger, sharper, and more confident under his guidance. She no longer felt like the rejected Omega. She felt like a warrior, a protector, and a partner in this struggle. The battle erupted with sudden fury. Kalen moved with the precision of a master, his injured leg forgotten in the heat of combat. Every strike, every command, every motion was calculated, drawing on years of leadership and skill. Amara fought beside him, her staff striking with accuracy, her mind anticipating the movements of the enemy. Together they were unstoppable, a perfect combination of strength and intuition. During the fight, Amara saw him for who he truly was, not just a king, not just a ruler, but a man capable of care, honor, and restraint. And Kalen saw her as more than an Omega, more than a survivor. She was his equal, brave, and unyielding, someone he could trust with his life. As the last of the rival soldiers fell, silence returned to the battlefield. The snow was stained with the remnants of the fight, but the kingdom had survived. Kalen looked at Amara, gratitude and admiration shining in his eyes. "You were extraordinary," he said, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. "And you are not the stranger I thought you were," she replied, her tone softening. "You are more than I ever imagined, strong yet human." Kalen took her hand gently, a gesture both simple and profound. "And you, Amara, are more than the world ever allowed you to be. You showed me courage, kindness, and loyalty when I needed it most. You saved me more than once." The bond between them, forged through danger and trust, had grown unbreakable. In that moment, they realized that the trials they had faced had not only tested them but transformed them. They were no longer the broken king and the rejected Omega. They were partners, equals, and something more, something rare and precious that neither could fully name yet. In the days that followed, Kalen worked to restore order to the kingdom. The loyal soldiers, inspired by his return and the courage of Amara, rallied to his side. Villagers who had hidden in fear began to speak openly, offering allegiance and support. The kingdom, once shadowed by betrayal and despair, began to bloom with hope. Amara stood beside him during these moments of restoration. She helped rebuild, counsel the people, and protect those who could not defend themselves. Kalen watched her with pride and quiet awe. She had transformed from a rejected outcast into a hero of the kingdom, a symbol of courage and loyalty. One evening, as the sun set in hues of gold and crimson, Kalen and Amara stood together on a balcony overlooking the kingdom. The wind carried the scent of pine and snow, and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky. "You've changed this place," Kalen said softly, his gaze on the horizon. And you've changed me." Amara turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "We changed each other," she replied. "I trusted you when I had nothing, and you showed me that trust can be returned and honored." Kaelin reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You are my equal in every way," he said. "Not because of title or strength, but because of heart and courage. I have learned what it means to lead with compassion, and I have learned that love and loyalty are the greatest strength of all." Amara's heart swelled at his words. She had faced rejection, betrayal, and loneliness, yet she had found someone who saw her worth, who valued her courage and heart above all else. "And I have learned that even the strongest can need help," she said softly. "Even kings can be vulnerable and still remain mighty." A silence fell between them, peaceful yet charged with emotion. For the first time, they allowed themselves to simply be, King and Omega, equals and partners, survivors and warriors. The people of Eldoria began to gather in the courtyard below, celebrating the return of their king and the bravery of the woman who had stood by him. The banners of the kingdom fluttered in the wind, and the shadow of fear that had haunted the land seemed to lift. Kaelin turned to Amara, his eyes warm. "Shall we walk among them?" he asked, his tone gentle but filled with authority. She nodded, smiling. Together, they descended to the courtyard, hand in hand, greeted by cheers and applause. The people looked upon them not as ruler and subject, but as symbols of hope, courage, and unity. Amara's heart beat with pride and relief. She had found a place where she belonged, not by right of birth or power, but by the strength of her heart and the choices she had made. Kaelin, walking beside her, felt a sense of redemption he had long thought impossible. The kingdom he had feared lost was being rebuilt, not just in stone and governance, but in trust, loyalty, and love. And beside him was someone who had saved him in more ways than one. As night fell, the kingdom quieted, the snow shimmering under the moonlight. Kaelin and Amara stood atop the castle walls, gazing out over their lands. The wind whispered through the towers, carrying with it the promise of a future forged in courage and trust. "You have given me something I thought was gone forever," Kaelin said softly. "Hope, faith in people, and love." Amara leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence. "And you have shown me that even the fallen can rise again," she said. "That even those rejected by the world can find their place and their worth." Kaelin pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, a silent vow of partnership, respect, and devotion. "We will face whatever comes next," he said, his voice steady. "Together. No shadow can overcome us now." Amara smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight and the fire within her. "Together," she agreed. And as the stars sparkled above, the kingdom of Eldoria seemed to breathe anew. The Alpha King and the rejected Omega had not only survived, they had transformed. Through trust, courage, and love, they had forged a bond that could withstand any trial, any betrayal, and any shadow that dared to fall across their path. The forest whispered in the distance, the wind carrying a soft promise. Peace might be fragile, but hope, once found, could endure forever. And for Kaelin and Amara, the story was not just one of survival or victory. It was one of redemption, union, and a love born from courage, kindness, and unwavering trust. They stood together, hand in hand, ready to rule, to protect, and to face the future, not as king and subject, not as stranger and outcast, but as equals bound by the strength of their hearts and the fire of their shared journey. And somewhere beyond the distant hills, a new day began.